Hello everyone, and welcome to episode 56 of Analyzing Evil, featuring Davey Jones from the Pirates of the Caribbean franchise. A lovesick erstwhile ferryman of the dead, Davey Jones is a sea-born horror of his own making, a man who shirked the duties given to him by a goddess he loved, transforming him into a creature of hatred and cruelty who knows no mercy for anyone who winds up in his clutches. In this video, we'll be delving into how Davey Jones transformed into this monstrous Lovecraftian Charon, one whose brush with the sting of betrayal irrevocably altered his emotional and mental state, a man so utterly overtaken by his own misery that he lives an existence dedicated to inflicting the pain he feels upon others. Now, Davey Jones is an unruly-looking creature, and though tentacles are quite problematic, perhaps he could have used a little help in managing his appearance with our sponsor for today's video, Manscaped. Manscaped is a company dedicated to revolutionizing self-care for men by offering cutting-edge products that utilize their skin-safe technology, helping to protect the most sensitive areas of your body during those lengthy maintenance sessions. Unfortunately for this eldritch tentacular eye, the human form I chose must have evolved from a gorilla, and hair has been a constant struggle for me throughout my life. Manscaped helps alleviate that immensely with their products like the waterproof Lawnmower 4.0 and Weed Whacker nose and ear hair trimmer, allowing you to get the perfect comfortable shave on any part of your body. Not only that, but Manscaped is now offering the Shears 2.0, a luxury nail kit to ensure that your nails look as sharp as your beard. With the holidays just around the corner, now's the time to treat yourself, or another man in your life, with a package from Manscaped. And for a limited time, you'll get 2 free gifts when purchasing the Performance Package, the Shed Travel Bag, and the Manscaped Anti-Chafing Boxers. In addition to that, you can enjoy 20% off your purchase by going to manscaped.com/thevialeye and using the promo code VIAL at checkout. So don't wait. Start giving your body the care it deserves today by going to manscaped.com/thevialeye or by clicking the link down below. Thank you, Manscaped, for sponsoring this video. Now, without further ado, let's explore the sad depravity of Davey Jones. Very little is known about who Davey Jones was before transforming into the half-man, one-third cephalopod, one-sixth crab creature that we see in the films. We do know that he was once a great sailor, and because of his accent, we can assume that he's Scottish, but that's essentially all we have as far as an origin story for Davey Jones. However, there is one component of Davey Jones that we're aware of that explains quite a lot about how he ended up mutating into the monster we see in the films, and that's the fact that Davey Jones loved the sea. Now, that might seem like an insignificant and mundane detail to point out about a person, especially a sailor. After all, I'm sure a great majority of people who spend their lives on the open seas love the sea. But with Davey Jones, I believe this love was a passionate extreme, one that marked Davey Jones as not just a man who loved the sea, but a man who loved the sea more than anyone else in the entire world. How else could a mortal draw the goddess and manifestation of the sea to them? Imagine for a moment that you are Davey Jones. You've had relationships with women over the course of your life, but you'd never found a woman that you could claim to be in love with. Perhaps because the right woman never crossed your path, or more likely, because your path has always led to the place where your heart and mind make their home, the sea. The salt on the wind, the waves crashing on the shore, the deck beneath your feet, the sunrise peeking over the horizon, the stars shining upon the still water on a clear night, the adrenaline that courses through your body as a storm tests your will to survive. Everything about the sea is worth loving in your eyes. It's no wonder, then, that upon finding a man whose eyes showed more passion for the waters of her soul than she had ever encountered, that the goddess of the sea became entranced with him in turn, revealing herself to him in human form, and returning the love she saw reflected in his eyes. For Davey Jones, this was a dream come true. Everything he lived for had suddenly become flesh and blood, a tangible creature that he could fully give all of his love to. However, loving an immortal being isn't without its problems, for the despair that comes with the realization that you will one day die while your love lives on is no doubt crippling. But with the powers of a goddess before you, this problem is nothing but sea spray dissipating in the wind. Your goddess, your love, offers you an unimaginable deal. Dedicate your life to ferrying those who die at sea to the afterlife, and in exchange, you will be granted immortality, the chance to be with your love for all eternity. That is, for a price. For your duties as Charon of the oceans requires that you stay bound to the sea for 10 years, and only after those 10 years may you set foot on land for a single day to be reunited with your love. The price may seem steep, but what do days and years matter to an immortal being? A single day following a decade becomes thousands of days spent with the woman you love over the span of an eternity. And whilst waiting for those moments to spend with your goddess, you get to spend your immortality amongst the waves you hold so dear. A deal that you couldn't have imagined in your wildest dreams. Now, everything I've laid out so far is, of course, speculation. But I believe this is a great way to explain how Davy Jones managed to come in contact with a goddess, and why a goddess would even bother with a lowly sailor like Davy Jones. However, though Davy Jones partly loved the sea for its unpredictability, he couldn't fathom that the woman who represented it would display the same degree of unpredictability. And when Calypso was nowhere to be found after his first 10-year stint, he felt betrayal like he'd never felt before. Not only because the woman he had pledged his love to had seemingly abandoned him, but because he felt he had been tricked into becoming her servant. And though he was still an immortal being who would roam the seas for all eternity, his love for the sea had been corrupted, and he no longer took the same comfort in it as he once had. So, to spite the woman who had so betrayed him, he conspired with the First Brother in court to bind her and seal her into a human form, essentially giving control of the sea to the multitude of pirates in the world, and himself. Not that it matters too much, but something that's interesting to speculate on is the time period that all of this took place in, and thus the age of Davy Jones. The time period that the first 3 films take place in is roughly around the year 1730. There was a book published in 2007 called The Pirate's Guidelines that stated that the First Brother in court met before Greece was founded. And though that makes for a legendary story, as Terry Rossio pointed out, one of the screenwriters for the films, the kind of pirate activities we see in these films weren't happening during that time in history, and thus it wouldn't make much sense for the court to have been formed that long ago. There have been pirates in varying forms throughout human history. However, they weren't as widespread or numerous until the Golden Age of piracy, the period of time that the Pirates of the Caribbean takes place in, which in our world lasted roughly from the 1650s to the 1730s. So it stands to reason then that the events of these films also take place during that time. And to back this up, we know that Henry Turner, the son of Will and Elizabeth, was born in 1730. Now, why is this information important in establishing a time period for the binding of Calypso? Well, because of the name we gave to this period in history, the Golden Age of piracy. This is obviously unconfirmed, but others in the fandom have pointed out that the binding of Calypso may have started the Golden Age of piracy, and I think this theory holds a lot of weight. After all, what better way for pirates to have control of the seas than to bend the sea to their will? So if the Golden Age of piracy started in 1650 in this universe as well, and Davy Jones was already a man aged well enough to have a graying beard, it would make sense then that Davy Jones at the time of our story is somewhere in the realm of 130 years old. Again, this information isn't really too important, but it's an interesting theory. And if you have anything to add to it, or you have one of your own, let me know down below. Now, after binding Calypso, a grief and guilt-stricken Davy Jones chose to cut out his own heart, the source of all the pain and misery that had fallen upon him in such a short time, afterwards choosing to abandon the duty he had been charged with. Due to Davy Jones neglecting his role as ferryman, the souls of those bound for the afterlife were forced to wander the vast ocean of eternity, forever stuck in limbo because of his selfish cruelty. And now, instead of ferrying souls, he roamed the 7 seas as a reaver, tricking gullible and fearful men into serving on his ship under 100-year contracts to escape death, a contract that would end in their souls being bound to his ship rather than sent to the afterlife where they belong. And after many years of neglecting the task he was given, Davy Jones' appearance began to reflect the beast he had become inside, the devil of the sea, who knew no mercy for the dead or the dying. And now that we've covered how Davy Jones came to be the creature we see in the films, let's take a look at who Davy Jones is. Now, the one thing that is present in many aspects of his personality is sadism. Whatever sympathy or empathy Davy Jones once had has completely left him, and the joy he takes in sending unfortunate souls to unending torment in his locker, adding them to his crew as an alternate form of imprisonment and torture, or harming, torturing, and killing people, is made plain for us. After all, as Davy Jones points out, life is cruel, and more specifically, was cruel to him, so why should the afterlife be any different? Especially when you consider that the man who stands in the way of that afterlife is willingly dealing out the cruelty he felt in life back onto others. His sadism can also be found in his twisted sense of humor, as Davey Jones very much enjoys belittling others, and he finds mirth and joy in taunting people and instilling into them a sense of despair. Though he seems to have a great degree of confidence, Davey Jones is quick to anger, and there are several points in both films where his rage overwhelms him and his snide demeanor falters as his enemies get the best of him. His appearance, which we've basically covered already, greatly bolsters these qualities, and it serves to instill terror into his prey, but his menacing mannerisms amplify his persona as a monster tenfold. Before coming upon his prey, Davey Jones walks slowly, building up tension as the creature of these hapless souls' nightmares comes into view, no doubt giving our dear captain a great amount of pleasure, savoring the fear he builds within his victims. He speaks slowly and deliberately as well, especially when offering a person the chance to join his crew, instilling the fear of death into them as he coaxes them into serving, offering a short respite from the inevitability of their deaths, and we often find him moving in impulsive, twitchy motions, adding a degree of maddening unpredictability to his character, a reflection of the rage that courses through every fiber of his being. There's one more component of Davey Jones we need to discuss, but that aspect of this man-turned-monster is best examined while covering his actions. Davey Jones is essentially a mass murderer, one who either kills of his own volition or orders his crew to do so, and if he's not killing, he's dooming the dead to an eternity of psychological torment or to become part of his ship of horrors. His crew is treated with little to no respect, and he frequently orders or engages in the torture of the people aboard his ship, making their lives as miserable as possible. Davey Jones, over the course of his 80-year reign as Reaver of Souls and Scourge of the Living, likely caused the death and misery of thousands of individuals, not to mention the poor souls who can't make it to the afterlife due to his neglect of his duty. But why? Why does Davey Jones feel the need to go on such a rampage? Because though binding Calypso may have momentarily satisfied his desire for revenge, it didn't heal the immense despair he experienced from her betrayal, and for the past 80 years, Davey Jones has lived in a world of unending anguish. His cruelty and his anger are a front, a way for Davey Jones to bury the deep loss he feels, masking his pain by lashing out at others. He takes all these horrid actions because he does enjoy them to a certain extent, but that joy was learned, not intrinsic, and every blow he strikes onto another person is a moment that allows him to forget the wounds he carries within his own soul. For perpetual rage is a great distraction from unending sorrow. He may have cut out his heart, but those feelings still endure within him, feelings that are exacerbated when his heart is near to him, an echo of how he was unable to handle the pain that love had brought him. Within Davey Jones, there's still a tender spot for love and lovers, and his kinder side bleeds through when his attention is brought to the topic, or when memories of the love he lost overtake him. When he's not masking his pain with violence or cruelty, he distracts himself with his organ, letting his anger flow onto the keys as he endlessly plays the tune of the locket that came from his lover. Above all, Davey Jones never stopped loving Calypso, and his sorrow not only shows us the pain he feels over her betrayal, but the guilt he feels over her imprisonment. And as we see towards the end of At World's End, given the chance, Davey Jones would unbind her and become one with her, as he had always dreamed, despite the pain she caused him. His decision to answer betrayal with betrayal would be his undoing, and the very woman, goddess, and force of nature that he loved would swallow him in a maelstrom born from his own short-sightedness. Perhaps at this end, Calypso may have forgiven her one-time lover, and Davey Jones may have fell to the depths to begin living out his eternity with his love. But perhaps not. Nothing in the Pirates universe is certain, and in years to come, we may find ourselves facing a reborn Davey Jones, angrier than ever and more unforgiving than we could imagine. And at this possible end, who was Davey Jones? He was a sailor who loved the sea unlike any other, a man who was offered the unimaginable opportunity to express that love to the very manifestation of the sea itself. Upon accepting the proposition offered to him by this goddess, Davey Jones would come to know utter betrayal, tearing his heart asunder in a hurricane of rage, sorrow, and self-pity. After taking his revenge on this woman who had so harmed him, Davey Jones found that the pain she had caused him still lingered, and though he had cut out his heart, The love he felt for her and the despair that love had brought him remained. So, Davy Jones took to the seas to unleash his fury onto the poor souls that he was charged with caring for. The monstrous man he had become on the inside, poisoning his physical form and transforming him into a horrid creature of the sea. Over the course of 8 decades, Davy Jones would bring death and suffering to countless individuals, luring souls to his ship, promising them salvation from the death that awaited them, introducing them to a world of pain and suffering that hardly made up for the delay from the ultimatum they so feared. Davy Jones was ultimately a cruel, spiteful, remorseless, and incredibly selfish man, one who put his own suffering above all else, decrying the wounds that had been inflicted upon him by inflicting greater pain upon others. A man who deserves no sympathy for the grief-ridden tantrum that he threw on the high seas for nearly a century. A man who willingly submerged himself into the dark waters of evil. Thank you all for tuning in to this episode of Analyzing Evil, and I hope you've enjoyed. What are your thoughts on Davy Jones? Did I miss anything? Let me know down below, and leave a suggestion for a villain you'd like to see featured in a future episode while you're at it. If you liked this video, hit that thumbs up button, and make sure to subscribe if you haven't already. A big thank you to all of my subscribers, and to my patrons, and a most vile thank you to those whose names you're seeing on screen now. Join the channel's Discord server and Reddit to interact with myself and the community, and follow me on the social media platforms listed below to keep up with the channel. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll be seeing you soon.